If you don't necessarily want to work with the Census Bureau's shapefiles, but you're looking for some other types of files, came over this website. So Carlos here, he provides these different shapefiles, and you can find from Americas. You can see here, you have Europe, you can get files from there. You got the world. What I did was I went to this world selection, and then I downloaded this first one here, the one you see here, this one. And it comes as a zip file, and then you can just expand it out and get the normal files that we usually get. So if I minimize this and I open up the QGIS, and then I go to my folder, here you can see the zip file, this world countries. I expanded it into its own folder here, this one. And now I can just grab the shape version of the files here with the extension SHP, drag it in and drop it. And voila, here you can see, here is the world's countries. And another thing we can do, we can maybe put a label on it. So if I put a label on it and I say simple label, and it comes up with the country. Now you can see the name and the countries here as well. And of course, we can double click over here, and we can maybe put some kind of styling, maybe some gradient fill, and apply that and say, okay. So here you have it. So now you have the different countries of the world, and you have a map for that as well in the shapefile. So next thing to do is to take these files and upload them into SQL Server. So what I've done is I take the US states shapefile, and I put it in this folder here on my temp folder. This is what it looks like, and I extract that out and I put it inside this folder here. So here, as you can see, is the shapefile, the project file, the DBF file, etc. So now we're getting ready to load it into SQL Server, and what I like to use is a tool called GDAL, which should be bundled with your QGIS if you download that. So what I've done is I created a file, and that file resides, let me see if I can find it here. And this file is the file here. So if you look at this file, this is what it looks like. So the first thing I do is to navigate here, because that's where this executable resides, inside this GDAL folder. It's called Ogre to Ogre. And here is a flag or parameter. It indicates the driver, which is a SQL Server driver, spatial. And this is the server instance I would have put it onto, my SQL 2019. This is the database I want to use. And I want to use Windows authentication. The file I want to load, I put into this folder here, which I just showed you. So I'm referring to the shape file here. Then I have the source projection, which is the WGS84. We already converted the shapefile for the US when we went through the QGIS. And also I have the destination being WGS84. This is the table name I want to create inside my schema. And this is going to be the geometry column name, meaning wherever the geometry from this shapefile is going to go. Then I have this final flag or parameter, which is called progress, going to give you some kind of progress bar when you actually run it. So now I want to navigate to wherever this file sits, as you can see up here, and then I'm going to run it. So what I've done is I have this shell script called OSGeo4W shell that comes with your QGIS install. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that like this. And I have copied over this reference here. So let me just point to that bat file I just showed you. I'm going to paste it in here and then hit enter. And as you can see, it goes through and now it's 100% done. So that should have loaded the data into SQL Server. So now we can navigate over to SQL Server. If you look now under the Geospatial, let's refresh the tables. Here is this US states table. So select that again and look at it. And here you can see this is the geometry column that I was talking about. Here you can see all the data that was created in that folder. Now we have a table inside SQL Server that has this. So as you can see, we successfully uploaded the US states. Okay, so what I did was I tried to get this to work. I went back one version of QGIS to 3.16. I still had some issues. So what I ended up doing was to download this GDAL 300-1911 64-bit core MSI and this other one here. So I installed these two. On the program files, it creates the GDAL folder here. This is what it looks like. What I ended up doing is I'm pointing to this one, and you can see there's an ogre to ogre here. I put it in there, and then when I open my shell that I already set up here, the OSGO4W shell, double click on that, my bat file for the loading the SQL Server, this one here. And we went through this already, just quickly. Here I navigate to wherever the ogre to ogre is, calling the ogre to ogre, Microsoft SQL Server driver. This instance is where I want to go. This is my database I want to put it in, and I use Windows authentication. This is the shapefiles I want to load, the world countries. Comes from WGS84 to a WGS84. The table name is world countries that I want to create. I want to call the geometry instance of the shapefile, the column itself, geometry. And then I have a progress bar. It's going to look like this. So let me grab this bat file and paste it. So it actually gave me a warning, but it ran through and it's 100% done. So let's go close this and let's go with the SQL Server and see what it looks like. So I'm going to refresh the tables. Here is the world countries. It also has created a couple of extra tables here. So let's select this. And voila, there it is, geometry column within this world countries table. And when we look at it in SQL Server, you can see it projects the countries of the world here. And because it's geometry, you're not going to have any projection available. So you can choose country, so you can actually see the labels here. So as you zoom in, you can see here is all the countries. And this is inside SQL Server Management Studio. So we were successful in loading the countries of the world into SQL Server.
Just to be complete, I wanted to share with you one final script that adds a little bit more to what we talked about as far as importing files into SQL Server. So I added this reprojection script here, and if you open that, it will look something like this. And there's a couple of differences here that you probably haven't seen yet. First of all, I'm going to this location to get the original US shapefiles from the Census Bureau. So in other words, without going through QGIS and exporting them out as WGS84. So if you look at these original files, they look like this. And the projection in that original file is NAD83, as you can see here. So that's the original Tiger files that came in from the Census Bureau. So what I want to do is I want to load these the way they are, but maybe load them as slightly different format. So I chose the NAD27, which is the predecessor to the NAD83. There were some corrections done in NAD83 that from the NAD27. NAD27 was used the reference point in Kansas for a farmstead there that they set as ground zero, and then they projected it out from there. You can read about those kind of projections on your own. For example, you can go to this website here or do a search for NAD27 and you'll find this here. So you can see here that all those is reference to this Kansas Meads Ranch, and that was the ground zero for this NAD27. So what I want to do then is I want to go here and look at the script. Notice the source is 4269, which is NAD83. That's the reference ID for that. And what I want to convert it into is this NAD27. So that's 4267. For example, if you go into SQL Server and you run that query here, you can see that's what I'm getting. I'm getting the NAD27 and the NAD83 for those two spatial reference IDs. You can see, in addition to that, I use this parameter called overwrite, and what I will do is if the table already exists in SQL Server, it will simply be replaced by this load here. I'm changing the name now for the table to be US States NAD 27, because that's what I'm transforming it into. And also, I'm using this geom name, I'm naming it geography. So far, I think we only named it geometry. I also add this parameter, which is the geotype. So it's a geography type I'm loading in. Otherwise, the same with progress bar and so forth. So the script is slightly more inclusive now. And let's see what happens when we actually run this stuff. So if I go up and I set a reference to that file, the reprojection file, and I hit enter, it gives me some warning stuff, but I'm not worried about it because it does load. You can see it finished loading. And if I go into SQL Server now, and I go and look at my geospatial database, you can see here that under tables, there is a US state NAD 27 created. So if I select that, this is the data I produced, and I called it geography. So you can see it's slightly different. Another place you can go to see what happened here is you go to this spatial ref sys table, and when I select that, you can see it put in this NAD 27 conversion. So that's what this record is doing here. It was added to this table to reflect that latest load we did.